I'm Fonzo.
And I'm Eliza.
And we're the co-host of Grown, a podcast from the Moth that shows we're never fully grown.
Growing up feels like a phase that should end at some point, but does it ever really? Whether you're 16 or 26 or 86, you're gonna have to deal with family drama, your body, and the type of person you want to be. So why not put it all out in the open and go through it together?
Join us every other week to deal with cringe, culture, and the courageous efforts of people like you to get grown.
Start listening today. Follow Grown on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.
For a long time, when people told me that an idea for something came to them in a dream, I was highly skeptical, thinking creativity takes work. Things don't just come to you. That hearty eyebrow raise remained until very recently, when the name for this show came to me in a dream. I was staying in a hotel on a work trip, enjoying a night of sleep in a king-sized bed, and bam, I awoke at 3 a.m. with just one word on my brain: embodied. I don't know how it happened, and to my knowledge, I haven't gotten creative guidance like that ever since. But it left me with so many questions. How meaningful is the content my brain is turning over while I'm sleeping? And if I started paying more attention to my dreams, what could I find out? This is Embodied. I'm Anita Rao. Welcome to the strange world of dreams.
I often put my phone down somewhere and can't find it later, like the counter, couch, table, shelf, floor. And shortly after I started dating my now husband, I dreamed that I did this with a baby. I lost and forgot my baby in a drawer or in a duffel bag, forget to feed it for days. But I always found it was always fine. But I woke up with an intense feeling of stress.
I remember back in high school, in my psychology class, we had to keep a dream log for about a month. And I had one for every single night. And I remember some of my classmates didn't have a single dream, at least that they remembered. And I just thought that was so mind-boggling. I couldn't imagine what it's like to not remember a single dream for an entire month.
One type of dream I tend to remember is a recurring dream. So I'm taking a class in school, but I haven't been to the class all semester. And I know for some reason that there's a midterm test or something in the class that day, but I have no idea where the classroom is. And as I walk around aimlessly looking for the room, I realize that I'm really late. I wish I remembered my dreams more often. They seem to straddle some space between here and there, wherever there is. It's an interesting place to visit.
That was Catherine, Grace, and Mark. I love hearing their stories because I've had my own version of each of those dreams. When I first got my dog, Oliver, I had a recurring dream that I left town and forgot that I had left him home all alone. To this day, I still have the same stress dream that I had in high school, that I arrived late having forgotten to prepare for an AP Calculus exam. And that story about a creative idea coming to me in a dream, I am far from the only person to have had that experience. Just ask Paul McCartney, Edgar Allan Poe, or director Christopher Nolan. Turns out our brains are primed for things to come to us while we're asleep.
There's kind of a loosening up, and it's just a more welcoming environment in some ways for creativity.
That's Angel Morgan. She's a past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams and a professor of transpersonal psychology at Sophia University. She's also a dreamworker, someone who helps folks understand the relationship between their dreams, their dreaming selves, and their creativity.
First and foremost, a dream is an experience during sleep, and we have 4 ordinary functions of dreaming: memory consolidation, problem solving, emotional processing, and future planning. So the content of our dreams is largely provided by the cortex, right? The outer gray matter. And that's where we have memories of our lives, and things from our lives get mixed in with other creative thinking that happens while we're dreaming. And then the sensory parts of the cortex provide the perceptual details, especially the visual and the auditory centers, and sometimes smell and taste as well, not as often. In my research on that link between dreams and creativity, I discovered three different directions, which there's a flow of energy. And one is from dreams to creativity. And that, an obvious example of that is like writing a poem from your dream that you had, or painting something. And then the other is creativity toward dreams. So that's when, let's say you've been working on a film set all day and then you have a dream and you're still working on the film set. So, there's creativity happening, or maybe, a problem with what's happening on the film set is getting worked out in the dream to bring an idea back. And that leads to the next way that it flows, which is back and forth in a conversation between waking and dreaming, between dreams and creativity. And I call that dream bridging as a verb. So the word dream bridge, I like to use that as a verb. And so to dream bridge is to consciously transform an experience during sleep into a creative form of expression that can be shared with others in waking life.
DreamBridge is also the name of the organization Angel founded and directs. It provides resources and education on the link between dreams and creativity. If you're interested in mining your dream content, but are one of those folks who seldom remembers their dreams, Angel has a few suggestions of where you can start.
There are two things that I look at to begin with for people, and that is dream incubation and dream journaling as kind of bookends of the sleep experience. So dream incubation is, going into the dream as you're relaxing and, creating your space for sleep and having good sleep hygiene and all of that, making sure you have all your electronics off, creating a nice environment, and then writing down what it is you would like solved or something that's on your mind you'd like to work on in a dream. That is kind of an invitation to your dreaming mind to get involved. Then the recall starts happening for people who don't remember their dreams, making the intention to remember them. And then the other side of it is journaling when you wake up, having a dream journal right next to your bed, right next to your pillow, or somewhere very easily accessible, or your phone, but something really easily accessible that you enjoy using, that it feels natural. If it is a journal, maybe I like to use sketchbooks and, different pens and markers and pencils that feel good, that I enjoy using. But it's up to the dreamer what they want to use. The main thing is creating that conversation back and forth.
You are reluctant to tell people what their dreams mean or kind of interpret dreams for them. Tell me about that and how you encourage people to think about making meaning from their dreams if that's something they're interested in.
Right. So telling people what their dreams mean can be harmful, but one thing that is really a better approach is to honor the fact that everyone has the capability to figure out what their dreams mean for themselves. And there are different ways of exploring that.
So you're really priming the pump to kind of build this relational experience between the dreaming and the waking state. But I'm curious about, times when what you're dreaming about, the content of your dreams, isn't necessarily telling you what it appears to be telling you on the surface. Like you're having a lot of dreams about death, for example, or dreams that are very violent. That doesn't necessarily mean that there is some violence in your life or there is death in your life. So talk to me about kind of the moments in which dreams are not necessarily a reflection or a real interpretation of our reality.
Right. So everyone gets to learn their own dream language. We all have our own associations with things, but most ordinary dreams tend to speak in symbols, metaphors, puns. We get to figure out for ourselves, death and dying in dreams, like you just mentioned, is a very, very archetypal symbol of transformation and change. for example. So there may be some dreams that are literal about death, but more often than not, they tend to be metaphors for, teenagers dream about death a lot because they're going through so much change, so much rapid change and growth in their lives. And it can be very scary for them. They're like, why am I dreaming about, I died or somebody died? And, so it really helps to understand that more often than not, dreams about, one thing may be, in fact, something else. And so, like I said before, I'm not going to tell anyone what their dreams mean because, but there are different kinds. And what I do when I work with people and groups, individuals and groups, is explore what kind of dream is this for you?
So you talked about, everyone has their own language of dreams, and dreams can mean different things based on your own language. When you're working with kids in particular, how can you help them kind of unpack and make meaning of that language? I'll give you an example. I have a 3-year-old nephew, and he's currently in the stage of his life where his storytelling really blurs fact and fiction. And I asked him the other day about his dreams, and he told me that his stuffed animal, Bow Wow, tells him that he should eat him overnight.
Do you ever have any dreams?
No.
No?
Yeah.
What do you dream about?
Bow Wow.
Bow Wow? What happens with Bow Wow?
Eat Bow Wow.
You eat Bow Wow? What does Bow Wow say overnight when you're sleeping?
He want me to eat him.
He wants you to eat him. Do you and Bow Wow go on any adventures overnight?
No. We don't sleep.
You just sleep.
And that was the extent of which he could tell me about what happened when he dreamed. And I didn't really know where to go from there in the conversation. I was kind of just like, okay. But what would you have asked next? How can you encourage that conversation with a kid?
Well, first I would say that's a really good dream. To tell children that's a really good dream. It's a really good dream. Even when they're having nightmares, that's a really good dream. Because I don't discern good and bad with children with dreams like that, because I want them to understand that it's okay and dreams are coming to help them. If I were in your shoes, I would ask my nephew to draw the dream. Get out some crayons and draw the dream and look at it together and say, wow, look at that. Just develop an appreciation for the dreaming and the sharing, and not necessarily going intellectually into the meaning of it. So helping support children with their imagination, saying, oh, what an imaginative dream. I love that. So Bow Wow wanted you to eat him? Why did Bow Wow want you to eat him? Just have a playful conversation about, well, how does that make you feel? Do you feel good about eating Bow Wow?
It is hard for me to imagine keeping a straight face while saying, how do you feel about eating Bow Wow? But hey, I am just the aunt, not the parent. So maybe it'll be easier to have these conversations with him in a few years. But I do feel encouraged to start exploring my own dreams more. And it's wild because just thinking more about dreams as we've been putting together this show has led me to remembering more of them and asking more folks to tell me their dream stories. And the results have been fascinating.
I'm standing in the driveway of my childhood home. And, there's a canopy of trees overhead, so I can't see the sky, but the light is sort of dim and soft, like it's sort of twilight. And I'm just standing there looking at my parents' house, and I feel something crawling around on my hand. And I look down, and there's a bee sort of just walking on my finger. And I'm just watching it. And then the bee stings me on my finger, and it falls off. And as it falls off, it leaves a thread connecting its body to where it stung me on my finger.
The strangest dream I think I had it after a dear friend of mine who happened to be a dog named Bear died. Bear visited me in a dream, and he was able to speak. He looked at me with his kind and loving eyes, and he said only one thing to me. He said, I miss the butter marbles. When I woke up, I remembered the dream, and I was kind of scratching my head, wondering what bear meant. Then a day or so later, it hit me. I used to throw Bear pieces of popcorn when we were sitting together in my living room.
Those were excerpts from the dream lives of Matt and Mark. There was a period of time recently that a ton of people got really into their dreams, way back in season 1 of the pandemic. On Twitter, folks were writing with the hashtag #CoronaDreams about the many vivid, bizarre, and emotionally charged adventures their brain was taking them on overnight. For me, there were many I could point right back to pandemic anxiety. Dreams about forgetting my mask or being in a large crowd of people without a way to escape. Dream aficionado Chris Ufere had some unusual pandemic dreams too, and paid close attention to some particular patterns.
I noticed, I'd say, about 3 main changes. First, who I dreamt about. While I was just living my life during the quarantine, I dreamt about my family members, my pets, more than ever. They were on my mind because it was one of the most stressful periods of my life. Also, I call this the Zoom effect. I dreamt a lot more about my coworkers or bosses or friends through on FaceTime, on Zoom, or on Skype. That's how we interacted during the pandemic. And I noticed that I even had dreams that I was talking to someone through a computer. That had never happened to me before in my life. And then last, and I think funniest, I call this one the Netflix effect. I started dreaming about celebrities or fictional characters from the TV shows I was watching the most in the pandemic.
Chris is the founder and CEO of You Dreamed, a free service that lets you log your dream content and analyze it. You can even compare and contrast your dream log with people around the world. After noticing the COVID dream phenomenon, Chris and other You Dreamed researchers analyzed 3,000 pandemic dreams. And one finding that particularly piqued my interest, of course, was an increase in dreams about sex and relationships.
People were dreaming more about sexual interactions and their partners. They were dreaming about non-partner romantic interests less, so people who weren't their girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife, and they're dreaming about their partners more. And this may be because they were not at work around those non-partner romantic interests. And there's some speculation that the increase could be associated with a baby boom later this year or early next year.
That's so interesting. So in terms of like the focus on those more kind of emotionally charged or sexually charged dreams, what did y'all figure out about why that might be happening for folks?
So being cooped up, being around your romantic partners far more, we had the surmise that perhaps people just had a lot of pent-up energy that they took with them to bed. And this is one of the theories about dreams, that research has shown that we carry specific emotions to bed each night and dream about them. So to us, it seemed that people were taking a lot of this energy they had, the sexual energy, and dreaming about it.
Chris and Angel are definitely on the same page that no matter what the content is of a dream, there's probably something to learn from it, even if it's just a reminder to pay more attention to your emotional life. But there is a distinction to make here. Dreams can be strange, and bad dreams can even be uncomfortable. But once dreams are affecting your sleep to the point of waking you up abruptly, that's when a bad dream becomes a nightmare.
Nightmare is essentially a bad dream that leads to a startled awakening. So it's that, you wake up very startled, your heart's racing, you're sweating, that sort of thing. Whereas a bad dream is where you wake up and it was a negative dream, but it didn't have that startling effect that a nightmare has on you.
That's Michael Nadorf. Part of his research as an associate professor of psychology at Mississippi State University is to determine what causes nightmares and what stops them. Before he takes us into it, a heads up that we are going to be talking briefly about suicidal thoughts and ideation. Okay, so the cause of nightmares.
Often they start in childhood. About 20% of us experience nightmares frequently in childhood. Some of that is just challenges with emotion regulation and that coming out in our dreams. Also, of course, trauma happens to a lot of us, and we know that trauma can often lead to nightmares. And in the short term, like right after a trauma, it's thought that that may be very healthy, that that may be part of the body's own exposure therapy to try to get over whatever happened. But also, longer term, often those that have had trauma will have those dreams persist.
So you work with folks both who are having nightmares from an experience of PTSD, this intense trauma, and others who are just having recurring nightmares, maybe not necessarily linked to a specific trauma. What makes them come to you? What makes it clinically significant? At what point are they not just kind of in our normal sleeping pattern?
Oh, that's a great question. We actually did a study and we found that of those with notable nightmares, with nightmares that really should be treated, only a third had ever told any healthcare professional at any point. So often we aren't approached because I think people don't realize. But typically the threshold we have is when you have more than one nightmare a week, one or more. And at that point, especially if it's having an impact on your life, and it's not immediately after a trauma, that's where we say it's probably worth seeing someone to see if we can help with that.
That offer of help comes in the form of 3 words: image rehearsal therapy.
It's one of those things, it seems so simple, like you question how it could work, but it works really well, and there's a lot of research behind it. So what we actually do is we take the old dream, we have the person change it any way they want. Change it, change who's in it, change where you're at, change anything about it. Add superpowers if you want. And then we have them practice that new dream using visual imagery for about 5 to 10 minutes twice a day. And usually one of two things will happen. Either they'll stop having that old dream, or in some cases, they'll start having the new dream, which is also always really interesting.
So one of the reasons that this works is because nightmares are actually kind of a self-reinforcing behavior. Could you explain that to us a little bit?
Absolutely. So, think of it, for instance, if you're afraid of dogs and you see a dog, the first instinct is to run away. And as soon as we run away, that takes that anxiety, that fear away. So it's reinforcing so that next time we see a dog, we're likely to run away again. We're likely to escape. I believe that nightmares are essentially an escape behavior. I think we have these negative dreams where we want out, we want to escape. And the escape is that we wake up. And every time we do that, we make it more likely that when we face that feared stimulus in the night, we're going to wake up. And that's why people get into the cycle of having these chronic nightmares.
So when we take that example and kind of bring it into the image rehearsal therapy, what would you do to someone who is having a recurring nightmare about this dog and you're trying to help them work through making that nightmare no longer be a nightmare?
With it, you could do a new dream where, instead of being a real dog, it was a stuffed dog. It could be, a very friendly dog. So I let the person really guide me on that. But the main thing is always to make sure that at the end of the day, I want it to be a dream that they'd like to have. That's really important.
Michael says that people have seen results from image rehearsal therapy in as little as a few days, especially if they make the image rehearsal a daily practice. Getting quick and tangible results can save lives in some cases. This link between nightmares and mental health is something Michael discovered when he first got into nightmare therapy by way of suicide prevention.
So nightmares are very robustly associated with suicide. And I'll be honest, I started as a skeptic in that there is literature showing the link, and I thought surely it was associated, it's caused by something else. So in my master's thesis, I looked at the impact of nightmares and insomnia on suicidal behavior and found that nightmares were still associated after statistically accounting for depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And that shocked me. I thought for sure those would explain why those with nightmares are at greater risk of suicide, and they didn't. And it just brought me into the field. And the more I delved in, the more I saw it. There's a study that's not mine, but they had 165 individuals who had previously attempted suicide. And they followed him for 2 years, looking at what factors actually predict future attempts. And if you had nightmares, not only were you more likely to attempt suicide in the future, you were more than 4 times as likely. And that was after they accounted for depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and also substance use. So there's something about nightmares that's really related with suicide. And what I think is exciting about that, and I know it's weird to say exciting, but it's exciting because we have treatments for this.
Michael's desire to help rid folks of nightmares is so genuine, he's willing to help anyone who wants advice. Seriously.
First, I'll give you a resource and then I'll give you an offer. So the resource is there's actually an app for Android and iPhone called Dream EZ, the letter E, the letter Z. And it was put together by Department of Defense and the VA. So, no cost on it. It's an IRT-based, an imagery rehearsal therapy-based app. And it works. We've actually done some research on it in my lab where we just told people, go download it and use it. And we saw a significant decrease in nightmares just from doing that. So if you don't have access to therapy, that's one thing. The offer I'll make is if you're dealing with nightmares and you're struggling to find someone to help you, you're welcome to contact me. Now, I'm only licensed in Mississippi, but what I'll do is either I can help if I know someone in your area, I can help you find someone, or if you have a therapist or someone that you're already seeing, I'm happy to consult with them to help them know how to do it, because it's just something that most of us were never trained on. But it's information I want to share, and I do that free of charge because I really want other people to know about this intervention because I think it's that important.
You can find Michael's contact information on our website or give him a Google. Michael Nadorf, Nadorff. And if you're seeking help for yourself or someone else, you can call the Suicide Prevention Hotline 24/7. That number is 800-273-8255. And before we go, here's another invitation to start investigating your own dream world and listening to others. One last dream story from someone who had no problem interpreting what his dreaming mind was trying to tell him.
So I'm in the middle of the desert and I see all around me these really lush green Lion King looking trees. So I wanted to start walking out to them. And as I'm walking, I have no idea how I missed this, but I'm stopped because I see this giant, like half melted, that movie Annihilation, like straight out of that movie, zombie looking elephant. So I get scared, doesn't notice me, but it's roaming around and I know it's looking for me. So I turn around. Immediately, I'm confronted by this, like, 4 times the size of a normal cougar. Again, very scary looking thing looking for me. It doesn't see me, by the way. So I freak out again and I run into another direction. And I see this, like, mildly creepy looking raccoon who's also looking for me. All these animals I know in the dream are looking for me, but none of them can see me. So I'm terrified. And all of a sudden, I look up. And I see this really, just like the trees that I was trying to get to, there's one sitting right next to me. And I notice in the dream that its shadow is protecting me, like the shadow of the tree is protecting me. And that's pretty much the end of the dream. I know the dream was God telling me, look, my dude, I got you, my dude, I got you. But that's one of the weirdest dreams we've ever had.
Embodied is a production of North Carolina Public Radio WUNC, a listener-supported station. If you want to lend your support to this podcast and WUNC's other shows on demand, consider a contribution at WUNC.org now. Incredible storytelling like you hear on Embodied is only possible because of listeners like you. This episode was produced by Kaya Finlay and Elizabeth Friend. Jenny Lawson is our sound engineer, and Quilla wrote our theme music. The show is supported by Weaver Street Market, a worker and consumer-owned cooperative selling organic and local food at 4 Triangle locations in North Carolina. Now featuring online shopping with next-day pickup. weaverstreetmarket.coop. If you enjoyed this show, share about it on social media and tag us. It helps new people find our show, and it means so much. Until next time, I'm Anita Rao, taking on the taboo with you.